Sheila here with Sirius Telus Moon, and yeah. Oh, Mercury hour, Mercury day. Happy Mercury day. Good morning, Mercury. Mercury. So let's honor Mercury for a little bit because Mercury is now in Pisces. And what I love about Mercury in Pisces, it's considered at its detriment, but if we think about what is the one detail that changes the big picture, Mercury is that detail. And our big picture is Pisces. Mercury is basically the planet that we tend to when we talk about arranging the details or playing around with the details in a way that generates different results. Mercury is our speech and eloquence. Wounds to Mercury or Chiron to Mercury can denote at something that happened at the age of language acquisition, which tells us another thing, and this is in reverence of Mercury as the ruler of Sedna. One of the things that people don't connect the dots between Epstein rings is wounds to Mercury, wounds to language acquisition. Things that happen at the pre-linguistic phase. Mercury also rules trade. And so when we have wounds that happen pre-language acquisition, particularly when it's violence or sexual violence, it affects language acquisition and expression, but it also affects our ability to trade, to do business, but it also affects our ability to commit and stand in contracts, and it also affects our ability to have a contract that we can stand in. Now, Mercury in sign of Jupiter is choice. What do we need to have a choice? We need the ability to say no in order to say yes. We need that ability to say no in order to say yes in a way that doesn't deprive us of the things that would create an ultimatum if we didn't have them. Jupiter ruling over Mercury in sign of Cancer. Exalted Jupiter, housing. If a person would be deprived of housing by saying no to something in a contract of, let's say, a tenantship, that is the contract is an invalid NDA. And that's being an extortion. Moon, 25 degrees. Moon next to the galactic center. Moon is trining Chiron, ascendant with Chiron. Ascending sign of real estate, Mars, 28 degrees, Pisces. What do people need to understand when it comes to their housing? The witchcraft, okay? The dark occult, the MK often, the computer interface that was basically raping people and blaming them instead of the rapist. Those type of things create real estate and land that harvests the energy of the people in it. It means that the people cannot grow on the land. Eventually, they won't be able to purchase a house. Think about the many problems of housing, whether it's termites, whether it's mold, whether it's, all these things can be resolved with simple building material and lime wash. Oh, but you say, oh, mold generates jobs if people can afford to hire. How faster would real estate deals be closed if people had lime wash accessible for them? So many of the things that people pay so much money to check for before they buy a house, for residents, I'm not even talking about investment property, would be solved with simple building material and lime wash. They can't be solved if you think that your daughter getting it with a guy that looked good but later were not compatible was fornication. Doesn't, but you don't connect as a good mother or father that to Epstein, to something not working when you live in your residence. I'm not even talking feng shui. So what if I told you there's something as simple as a society or an environment with zero rape, zero slavery, zero energy siphoning could immediately do things that even the best feng shui master cannot fix when the property is not owned or in a county that's ran by people that have infiltration by something like the Epstein. Red or blue, black or white, male or female, north or south, east or west. That's Mercury, and what people think is a sign of detriment. Now again, is not they call it detriment for a reason. Think about try to find a droplet in the ocean to shift that droplet would change the ocean. Well, it's very easy to think about because if we put certain PFAS in the ocean, if we just stop putting PFAS in the ocean, that would change the entire weather and ecosystem. That's Mercury in Pisces. So it's in detriment because it's difficult to find what would be the thing that would change everything. And Pisces is a non-verbal sign. Okay, it's difficult to microscopically see something. Oh, hello, pack of mulecles in the entire Pacific. Which one of you is not belonging here? That's why we say Mercury is in detriment in Pisces. So it's not wrong to say it, but when we think about detriment, it's not lacking value in that sign. Now we begin to come to the what are the things regarding any religion, sect, or culture, or business, or trade, or politics, or municipality, or landlordship, or ownership of a house, or contracts or tenants. What's the one thing that changes everything? Zero rape, zero slavery, zero energy siphoning. Without it, no contract is valid. No choice is actually a choice. If a person doesn't have a house without being raped or raping, being siphoned or siphoning, being enslaved or enslaving, the entire place is run down. That place can be an empire. That's how Rome fell. Okay, nobody remembers Pompeii. People remember the fall of Pompeii. Cassandra was warning, nobody listened to Cassandra. Okay, now rape creates artificial depth. Somebody raped, let's say your child is raped. Let's say they're gonna do great at school. Not gonna go. They're not gonna not do good at school. They're gonna do great at school. Everything functioning well. They try to get a job. They work at this, they stop. They work at this, they stop. They work at it. What's happening with this person? It has so much potential. What happens with those jobs? What do they say no to? But then they date 1, 2, 3 dates. Ah, what's happening there? Are they gay? Are they lesbian? No. What's happening there? Remember something with that child? Yeah, that child. They say that they would see dead people or whatnot. We took them to a Mormon priest in our community. Good morning, your child is ritually abused. They probably had to rape children, probably had to kill children. Teal Swan talked about something like that in the 80s. Was wiped out as satanic panic. Later, everybody complains, Teal Swan plagiarized, Teal Swan plagiarized. What did you want her to do? Be raped for work? When the entire psychiatric community was with the Epsteins and with the traffickers? So she changed the psychiatry. And again, I don't know if she's affiliated with the Epsteins or not, but people had the chance to get her to not be, even if she is, at the 80s when she spoke about what happened to her. That is called the right to exit violence. You really expect to have housing that houses without the right to exit violence. Now it sounds reasonable. But when women tell women that when they marry a man, their body is their husband's, and the husband's body is God's. Big shout out, first of all, shout out to Off Grid Guru, talking about the challenges in closing a real estate deal, or why do people don't have accessible housing from his perspective as a realtor. Why is my video history not compounding? Want to give a shout out and I don't see the video. Okay, you probably people don't connect what seems very romantic. When people are in love, it can seem very romantic. Okay, when people are lusting for each other, they the same. Oh, your body is your partner's, and their body is yours, and then your bodies are God's. It seems very romantic. That's human trafficking. Can both of you divorce? Does both of you have a house when you divorce? People that traffic people don't help people. They create the conditions to energy siphon. Now the entire lineage is where, and I was shown feminine energy. And her lineage was passing down and seemed like red and yellow. But the red and yellow weren't healthy. What do I mean by that? Because with her heritage, what was passed down was people being binded or imprisoned. And how is this passed down? If you watch Douglas McIntyre interview by Annika Lucas, then it shows how his father would use the child's hand to murder a person and say to the child, you did it. MK Ultra and MK Often, that passes the lineage of making people admit to something that they didn't do, is a continuation on that practice. And this is how the wealth is passed in the family, with the risk of binding, with the risk of jail. And then the child, what would it do? It would learn to do the same to not just his children, but also his students, the people that study their teachings. This is why when we talk about certification or qualification, it's often a certain sort of jail binding to take charges for felonies that the teacher was committing. And this is the structure of the patronage. Now, what about people that right now we have social media? A person could study astrology without going through these rites of passage. This is why I can talk about MK often, where my teachers can't. So how do they unbind? Well, by ceasing rape. Basically, we track back, if we talk about and this is exactly that topic of the lineage, the teeth of the children will no longer rot for the sins of their parents. Abolishing those practices and seizing them at the core, even consciously being aware of that, is already opening and inviting more points of interference for deprogramming from those type of practices that sometimes come with dissociation. Even knowing that schizophrenia, disordered dissociative identity, is a result of these practices in the lineage, in the family, in the society. And that the antidote is the seizing of the targeting of the individual. Housing first independent of ability to work. And believing what was up until several decades, what let's say in Victorian times would be considered psychotic content. It's intelligence, it's information. Because in those lineages, why the teeth of the children would rot for the parents eating unripe fruit? What is the parents eating unripe fruit is Epstein Island. That's the unripe fruit. Why do the children's teeth rot? Because they commit the same things. When we stop committing, when we stop eating unripe fruit, now here is the drama. Raping a child is not, as per extortion cult logic, is supposed to feel as the most natural and sometimes even mutually pleasurable thing in the world. This is why they made misplaced arousal and trauma bond. It's supposed to look like something that is so natural when it's exactly the opposite and it's done by trauma. Because if a child was raped, they would look for being in power in that situation, or being where their pleasure is catered to by a person of authority. And they will continue to look for that now when they become in the situation without outlet. When they were disempowered, they turn to disempowering and the only outlet is putting themselves as the victim. And this is why younger generation has to really be cautious. And they have to really be cautious from normalizing rape. Because if they think that there is such thing as sex work, there's a generation above them that still tries to exit violence, and every juncture of therapy is designed to perpetuate the patterns that serve the extortion cult. Now, what happens when people try to pass debt through the lineage, or to pass criminal charges through the lineage? They call it brotherhood and sisterhood. This is the fraternities and sororities. That the brotherhood and sisterhood would be to serve time or to take the charges of somebody else. Now, of course, that is impossible. And so that person would seek to do that to another person. And this is how recruitment happens now. When people are promised power, charisma, and so on and so forth, and to get away with, they have to generate a situation with people who want to get away with. Because as I mentioned in my previous video, somebody asked me, Shirley, what would you want to get away? If you could do anything in the world and getting away with that. I saw this video of a car traveling through Finland. But then it had to stop because a reindeer was crossing the road. And I'm like, hey, can I get away with that? Not so in itself, not supporting extortion codes. If it's okay to be monogamous and it's okay to be not monogamous, as long as nobody rapes and nobody's minor, you can't extort somebody for cheating. You can look profoundly, where did somebody thought that they can be monogamous but discovered that they can't? And you can try to see how do you, shout out to Till Swan, take accountability for the impact on the marital life. But also the person that pressured somebody to be monogamous when they didn't even know if they could be also has created an impact over somebody's life that they need to be taking accountability for. And also the culture, whether it's the church or the synagogue or the mosque or whatnot, that taught them that sex is only within marriage, that trying to see if they're sexually compatible is fornication, and that divorce is something to be avoided at all costs. They also created an impact that they need to take accountability for. Now, also, I was watching an interview, shout out to Cults to Consciousness, of a Jewish Orthodox boy that exited Jewish Orthodoxy. And he said when he was within Jewish Orthodoxy, he was addicted to porn. When he got out of the indoctrination that he cannot even execrate as his self pleasures, then he stopped being addicted to porn. How do we account for that? If he couldn't even self pleasure, he was addicted. If he can meet his needs adaptively, he's not addicted. What else doesn't he want to do? Rape children. When someone is addicted, then it's easier to get them to get off on one scene, then another scene, then another scene, then a scene that capsulates something that's to do with the trauma that he had in infanthood. The first relation. Now, what if that first relational trauma was him being raped as a child? He's going to be jerking off to what? Ask Mark the Troll. They did that to him again a month ago. And found pedophilia materia in his phone in a maximum prison. How did he get there? Just when the Epstein files are out, there's a discussion over genociding entire Iran. And the last time somebody tried to litigate United States for genocide, namely the Kurdistani genocide in the Palestine, was Rolodex and Detru dossiers being exposed because somebody could have been at the Hague. The Dodge wanted out of the deal. Now, you don't normally connect that to the boss that stares weird at the employees. let me tell you something. Even when we talk about recovery after the Me Too, I said, if the person that was at the academia at where I met him was an adjunct, I don't know what would be his role in intelligence. If he was as an adjunct trying to get me into something like probably the Epsteins, then let's say I litigate him. Where would be the judge? Structure. So I need to heal myself. Okay, amazing. I need to heal myself. Where would be in the structure the cycle? Let me tell you where he was in the structure. He was deciding which children go away from their parents. We all know where, and which not. That was his other job. Now, and then there are these courses that talk about even in self-pleasure, we need to make sure that we're not violating our own boundaries. I said that's good for the world to know. Is there something that I'm doing that I could do different that could prevent me to even be of erotic frequency that's in the vicinity of that dumbfuckery? Amazing. I buy that course. A week into that, they're looking for employees for the sales team. It's amazing. Why should I complain? If the people don't understand what am I even litigating for, why not explain them and make money? Then then the attacks begin to go from within to the outside. Psychic attacks, astral rape. Why? Because I stopped doing them things that I thought that is masturbating, but was actually violating my own sexual boundaries. That, by the way, have to do with targeted as being an infant by these very MK Alpha and MK Ultra Epstein cults. And then something's looking like completely invisible was basically a chronicle situation. Now, I did not jerk off with porn, so I didn't even have a reason to think. I did not have porn addiction. I did not have sex addiction. I didn't even have a reason to think. And the minute I try to bring those things, I say, oh, now I have what to go to therapy with, an actual thing that, amazing, that was going directly to the informants of the Epstein ring, which the therapist was serving. Now, imagine what's happening to the people that do watch porn. that do become addicted. And not only that, when somebody would say justice or karma, I would recoil because I didn't believe that justice can ever be protecting me from rape. So there was no point to even approach the justice system. And because of the invisibility of these things that are very visible, these are classified technologies funded by classified project budget that's directly funneling not just public money, but job opportunities, housing, right to mine minerals, the education of your children, the right to facilitate labor that is actually supportive of the mother, the child, and the father, or the mother and the mother, or the father and the father, being looted to traffic, to create perpetual trauma. To sell you something that causes inflammation and something that's supposed to treat inflammation but will later be foundation for cancer. That you must take because otherwise, oh, if that child doesn't take that drug, they might kill themselves. But why do they try to kill themselves and run away more when they do take that drug? Oh, they don't want to help themselves. Well, why doesn't somebody address it when they finally speak about something that happened at hospital? Oh, we need to have a committee, commission, a committee. Epstein ringers lining up. They're used to commissioning themselves. That's literally extortion code. That's the commission. Today today I don't think anybody can even have. Maybe in the past they could, but today I don't think anybody can have a press certificate without, which can be, which can be, how they couldn't prevent the arrest of the press when they tried to broadcast the evacuation of the 10 cities, violating the First Amendment. I know why I don't have a press certificate. I was a journalist in high school. Now, what do they do? Catch people for taxation. Well, most of that is artificial debt created by rape. If we abolish rape, then we disentangle from those invalid NDAs. And that's one way that leads to the timeline of the teeth of the children will no longer rot because their parents ate unripe fruits. It's only when the children stop doing that and recover from that, going from trauma bond to secure attachment, from misplaced arousal to relaxed arousal, meeting the erotic and non-erotic needs, honoring the erotic, non-erotic self. The person that raped children, and here's something I was shown. People were having their emotional needs met, and that came with inheriting crime charges that they didn't do. Now, of course, that doesn't breed too much monogamy. And of course, the cult reasoning would be to try to make marriage as okay, as much of a contract as possible. Now, here is the thing: when a person has been deprived of, then deprived of, then deprived of, they expect the marriage to be the place of safety, and then they even more want monogamy. Have you noticed that the more we are embodied and tending to our own self pleasure and less people pleasing, the less we are bothered if somebody might abandon after sex? Because the more we understand, what do we need to have sex? Well, does the medical system support well-being, support life? Not just pregnancy. Does the economic system? What are the needs that we meet when we go to be intimate? Just like we tend to emotional eating. Isn't it true that the more I am tending to my own happiness as an individual, not to saying, oh, I don't need people. Some people are more oriented to be soloists. Some people are more partners. But isn't it true that the more I have support system outside of a relationship, housing independent of whether I'm married or not, or having sex or not, isn't it true that I'm less of how should I say that? Less, that as a spouse I would be way more of a friend than a lover, way less of a nuance and a bother. And then what will prosper? The love, the relationships, but not the extortion cults. And isn't it true that when I don't seek approval beyond like a normal phase at my partner, and I'm not in competition, then if somebody would say, hey, your husband had an affair with someone, okay, what weren't they doing before that now it awakens? And then let's say I see my husband starts to paint, my husband starts to sing, and it wasn't doing that when we were together. I said, okay, that third person brought something to their relationship. I should be more worried that their so-called affair is not rapey towards anybody than if they are cheating or not. Do you know that under societies in Israel, there was a research, and in Israel there's a lot of ritual abuse. Women were more concerned about their husband cheating than their husband raping someone. There's way less people pleasing and way more intimacy where we accommodate for life. Doesn't go with extortion cults. Men are more successful at committing suicide. Women are afraid to be assassinated upon divorce. Men usually successfully commit suicide. Effectively, they are dead. Because anything that comes close to an emotional support system comes with inheriting criminal charges, usually for molestation. Now, here's the sad part. They do it. And they do it to begin with because we didn't talk about sexuality as anything other than don't do fornication. And then whatever happened to that child becomes an addiction, that there are a lot of places that are, and in that addiction some safety needs can be met, some um, unleashing of catharsis, and that can imitate healing. And it's also presented to them as healing. Oh, these people, they can recover. How will they recover? By raping another person? Well, it helps the recruitment, and it also helps the religions that support that. Now, a religion wouldn't outright tell you it supports pedophilia. I saw an advertisement of dancing in Judaism. Why not make your passion a profession? At first I thought, when she said dancing in Judaism, I thought, oh, it's nice. The Jews realize they have to accommodate for women dancing, and they made a dance class for women. No. It's human because this is not dancing in Judaism. It's a person raped, tortured to loss of sense of self, mind controlled, so that they participate in energy siphoning ritual. And outside that circle, they are horprice. When my parents were living in a village that was a veterans village, and then it became religious. My father was Dutch, my mother Israeli. They traveled, they loved to travel, so they traveled to the United States, brought 2 English sheepdogs. Now it's summertime. Summertime, summertime in the Middle East. My mom was a little overweight, so she used to wear a strapless dress and walk with the dogs. Not a problem. uh, in the beginning, it was not an issue. In fact, my biological father is from there before they got religious. When they became religious, now when people are religious, they have their religion. Person has the. You see, my mother walking with the 2 dogs, and her husband. That's the guy that was ready to cut a piece of his penis to marry my mom. She said, and then it was in Netherlands, so they were supposed to. They went to some Orthodox ministry, and then he said to them, "You pay me 5,000 gulden, you are Jew." And he was ready to pay, and she said, "My mom said over my dead body." And that's how she saved my father from genitalia mutilation. So they married at the municipality. But still they had to divorce at the Orthodoxy. Now, what was that change essentially? Why was it bothering somebody that my mother goes walking the dogs dressed in normal clothing, not wearing a tent or so? Because these coats, they siphon the energy of person. This is why they would say person inside the cults, they would traffic people. But outside, if somebody walked even with a strapless shirt, they would be considered pretty. And she was a married woman. Eventually, not, and then they said, okay, my parents, they come citizens of the world. They said, okay, but this place doesn't want us here. We don't have to be here. They tried to sell the house. 2-3 years, people come see the house, and my dad is Dutch, Ma is with Virgo stellium. The house is clean, looking good, okay? Good property. Okay, the house is doing good, even without a lime wash. Come to buy, go. They come to buy, go. They thinking to buy, they go. 2-3 years. Until they realized that there was a neighbor that they wanted a particular type of Jews. Eventually he found the people that bought the house. But then my mother would have been pregnant with me. Then they moved to a place more secular, Kfar Saba. The place original was later called the Bnei Brak. Years later, I'm in open apartments, which means volunteering in developing neighborhoods. As we volunteer, we would hear from the neighbors that lived there. And they would say, yeah, this used to be the strongest neighborhoods, but then came a mayor, before the current mayor, it dropped everyone down, and it became a human trafficking hub. So we as students were volunteering for a developing neighborhood. For me, that was housing. I am in my apartment second year. A neighbor comes, she is religious, somewhat secular religious. When she would drink a little bit, she would dance like crazy, but religious. And I said, this is nice person, what do I care if they're religious? But she has a dinner, I think it was a Shabbat, and reading something from about children, that there was a question whether to murder these children or not because they were mamzer. And she was in the opinion that of course we need to murder mamzer children. She forgot that ritual abuse many times results in castration. At a very least, harm infertility. In fact, when I had undergone a psychic attack of ritual abuse, it was like somebody was putting a lot of trauma, which later, after listening to Annika Lucas, what happened to her as a child, they were doing psychically. When I said no, when I left therapy. Now, what do people eventually get? They get to the realization of that moving to another place is not going to necessarily solve the issue. They're also, when people are seven, they're being deprived of the means to move to another place. What then comes? Persecution of the people that were practicing those practices. And even with people, let's say when it was about the Me Too, when we didn't address the dark occult, there was a problem. We could get the fact that the jurisdiction process is not compatible. There cannot be due procedure when the nature of sexual offense is such that it harms the ability to provide testimony. We began to address that. Amazing. That was one chapter. But we could not move forward without addressing with the esoteric and the connection to religion, the connection to real estate. And then even that was, okay, people talking about ritual abuse. And so ritual abuse is wealth consolidation over natural resources that are also real estate. No, it's nothing to do with housing. Amazing. Now Israel is accused of genocide in Gaza. Where people are saying sex work is work, then Arbeit macht frei. It's same ritual. Rape, torture, energy siphoning under the guise of labor. Doesn't matter what they wear because they already wear nothing. If Eva Braun was trafficked, if Eva Braun was to be raped in marriage, if she was to be raped in marriage and to somehow continue the lineage, isn't the safest bet to be married to the guy that commits the Holocaust? But then when there is Holocaust, people say, oh, it's because women were not modest.